Team Duels pointing to me. That was hard.
Esposito, Kornoya, Tretiak, Kuzkin, Yakoshev. Legendary names in ice hockey. All these men took part in ice hockey's most prestigious event, the series between Canada and the URSS in 1972. September the 2nd, 1972, on the ice at the Montreal Forum, the crowd would witness an historic encounter. The Canadian professional elite taking on the Soviet national team for the first time. Up till this point, international competitions were strictly amateur only, and the Canadians were restricted to the North American pro circuit. The program involves 8 games in a month, 4 in Canada, 4 in Moscow. 8 games finally allowing the 2 hockey giants to go head-to-head.
We tried to play like the Canadians. They were great players, and we had a lot of respect for them. During the first game in Montreal, as the players were being introduced, we could hear drums, foghorns, people were throwing popcorn in the air. The atmosphere was pretty intimidating for us. We were paralyzed for the first 40 minutes, as back in the Soviet Union, that sort of thing doesn't happen. We found it quite frightening.
Number 20, Vladislav Tretiak.
We weren't used to playing in such an atmosphere, with thousands of Canadian supporters yelling for their team. And when the commentator introduced the Canadian players one by one, the applause lasted for quite a few minutes. These were real stars we were playing against. The Montreal Forum was buzzing like a beehive, and we realized how much the fans loved their idols.
To make up the Canadian team, the series organizers had brought together the best players from across the North American continent. And the first time many of the greatest names in hockey met was whilst wearing the same maple leaf strip.
I remember reporting August 14th, meeting all the guys, which is always fun. And we didn't train very hard. We partied, we drank a lot, we didn't get much sleep, and we didn't do any exercises. All the guys, you know, we had a lot of fun. After the practices, we'd go out and drink beer and carouse and have a great time at night. Next day, come back hungover, skate again. But that's how we used to do it when we went to our regular, because you had 6 weeks. And 6 weeks is a long time.
The Canadian pros began the game confidently, certain that they would annihilate the Soviets. 30 seconds into the game, Phil Esposito scored the first goal. A few minutes later, Paul Henderson increased their lead.
With the score, Canada 2 and the Soviets 1. This is game 1 from Montreal.
I remember when we let in the second goal in Montreal. The organist started playing the funeral march. And our sticks were shaking in our hands until we finally scored our first goal. And then we started to loosen up.
32, and that's the way the score stands with 7:38
We're up
remaining
2-0
in the first period.
for 10-minute mark. And we figured, oh boy, there's no problem. Then we got into a penalty problem. We got a couple of penalties that were like, we couldn't catch them. That's why we got the penalties. And they really started to turn it on. And I remember sitting on that bench, and I was sitting beside, who the heck was I sitting by? Oh, Cornway. And I said, Ivan, these guys skate like you. Because Ivan Cornway was the best skater I had ever seen. You know, he was fast and, I really like Ivan a lot. And he says, they're in good shape too. You know, in his broken English, he said, they're in good shape too. I went, no kidding. I says, I'm dying. How about you? He says, I am dying. And I mean, I bet you I lost 10 pounds that game.
Right to the opposition blue line as long as you're inside the red
The Canadian
line.
stars were getting tired and began to pay for the serious lack of preparation. Even Ivan Konoya, the man known as the Train due to his exceptional speed, couldn't catch his breath.
They'd like to be in, makes a lot of back checking.
Le style de jeu était vraiment différent. Alors,
Their style of play was completely different. They played in a way that we didn't recognize.
J'avais dit, j'ai vraiment peur.
I remember saying to myself, I'm really scared about this series and this team because we know nothing about them. We never played against them. So what are they about? We'd been used to playing in the National League, where everyone knew each other. We knew each other's style of play. But the Russians, that was something else.
Alors, il fallait vraiment s'adapter.
They broke all the rules of the game. Like, they would come up the ice and they didn't like what they saw, they'd turn around and go back. Like our coaching, if you ever went backwards, I mean, you would be on the bench. And so they broke all the rules. And when you expect them to shoot the puck, they didn't. They passed it. And when you thought they were going to pass it, they shot the puck.
Very tricky player.
Boys, oh boys, we had undersold these people, and boy, did that turn out to be prophetic.
Their teamwork, that's what I remember mostly. The passing, the skating, their teamwork, you know what I mean? But the other thing, nobody smiled. Nobody. That was like, there was no emotion. They were robots to us. It was over here, over here, over here. They were like robots on the ice. Pop up over here, pop up over there, pop up.
The Russians weren't robots, just athletes from the Soviet mold. Complete athletes, trained in the great communist school tradition. The Soviet system produced exceptional athletes through very strict multidisciplinary training programs. Russia has inherited the tradition. This is the St. Petersburg Training Center, a club directed by Boris Mikhailov, one of the 1972 team leaders.
At the time, Soviet hockey relied heavily on physique. This is true of European hockey in general, and it still is. You start by working on the athlete's physical aspects: speed, endurance, stamina, and not only during the matches, but in training as well. On the other hand, the North American school puts the emphasis more on the game itself. Over there, it's more about the number of games and putting together the different phases of play, rather than acquiring and maintaining peak physical condition.
Mikhailov nearly got loose, gets it over to Petrov, back to Mikhailov, right in the clear, right in!
The second period was a nightmare for the Canadians.
Varlamov goes down over the line, cutting in around Ari, a shot, he scores!
The Soviet machine was in full attack, throwing everything at them until the final score read USSR 7, Canada 3.
To score for the Soviets. This is what the Soviets do.
We ended up hammering the Canadians in the first match, and we were shocked by their attitude. We all lined up for the traditional handshake, but they went straight off to the dressing room.
And the USSR have defeated Canada in the first
Protocol
game.
indeed required that players shake hands at the end of a game. Devastated by their defeat, the Canadians left the ice.
Montreal.
We were so disappointed. I mean, we were embarrassed. I mean, I wanted to crawl under the ice. I mean, first game at home and they just blew us out. And so NHL, we're not used to staying around. You get your butt kicked. You want to be out of there. And so as soon as the game was over, I mean, we were out of there. And maybe they told us, but we forgot about it. And then we were really embarrassed because we didn't stay out there, and that was really bad sportsmanship. But We just didn't, no one picked up on it, but it was not good.
Alexandra Yakoshev was joint top goal scorer in the 1972 series with Canadian Phil Esposito. The Canadians nicknamed him Big Yak due to his size. Today, Yakoshev is a living legend in both Russia and Canada.
I think my favourite goal was the one I scored in our first game in Montreal. It was our 7th goal against the Canadians. I slipped through the area and stopped. Dryden, the keeper, thought I was going to score and dived. And all I had to do was put the puck in the far corner of the net. It was a great goal, and both the players and the crowd loved it. I remember our first practice session in Montreal, before the first match. Our time on the ice was scheduled for after the Canadians. So when they finished, we took their place on the ice. They went off for a shower and we began our session. Then they turned up in little groups to watch us practice. They sat down here and there in the stands, looking very relaxed. They seemed to mock us a bit. They watched us training in a kind of condescending way, I think. They were laughing at our old equipment, our helmets, and worn-out kit and gloves. I suppose we didn't look that impressive.
Few Canadians realized that on the ice in front of them were some of the world's best players. In particular, an exceptionally talented goalkeeper by the name of Vladislav Tretiak, today considered the best goalkeeper of all time.
And they're showing real puck control. Finally, Petrov came through to stop the play. Definite penalty here, and really...
That photo was taken before the game, during the 2 national anthems. I always used that time for concentrating and focusing. And I think really that's what the photograph shows.
Today, Tretiak is a successful politician. A few days before the start of the 1972 series, the Canadian coaches went to assess the Soviet team. They concluded that Tretiak was the weak link. They didn't know he was about to get married.
I couldn't stop thinking about whether I'd finally get the permission to marry and how many bottles of champagne were needed. That's all I could think about during that match. A wedding is a big step in a man's life. Naturally, I wasn't concentrating. I let in 9 goals that day. I think we lost 9-3 or something like that. The Canadians who were watching said the Soviet goalkeeper was very poor and only 20 years old. In Canada, I'd still be playing with the juniors.
In Canada, the defeat was all the more painful because it seemed so unlikely. The country was in a state of shock.
They were stunned, just like we were. I mean, just like, what happened? It was just terrible. You know, this was going to be so wonderful that we were going to put these Russians in their place and finally establish that, you know, they'd beating our amateur teams then at the Olympics, but they'd never played the big boys. And whoa, I mean, we knew we had a monumental task on our hands. It was going to be a dogfight right to the end.
As the crowds poured into the Maple Leaf Garden in Toronto to witness the second encounter, it was now the country's honor that was at stake. Canada was hungry for revenge. It was in the middle of the Cold War, and the communists were not exactly popular in North America.
They were taking over the world. Obviously, now they're invading our ground. I mean, in Canada, this is our game. And now they're embarrassing us. And so, I mean, we knew they were pros. I mean, they were more professional than we were, because that's all they did. But it was just their way of life against our way of life. And as it went on, it became war. I mean, we really felt it was our way of life against their way of life.
The USSR players lined up alongside the Canadians were far from simple amateurs. They were Red Army soldiers or members of other administrations and formed part of the regime's elite, living a very different life from the average Soviet citizen.
In fact, we were like professionals, although we didn't have the salaries the Canadians had. But basically, we were professionals too. We understood that politics played an important role, and each time we won, our directors told us that we had performed a great service for our country. And that even our diplomats, working for 5 or 6 years, could not have achieved what we had in a few matches. A lot of us were party members. We were part of a system. It was impossible to avoid it. And yes, we probably did believe in that system, as there was no other solution. It had been that way since we were kids. Everywhere we went, we were propagandists for that system.
Hockey was very popular in our country. At home, we used to say that the 3 most important things were hockey, space travel, and ballet. You have to understand that sport was an extension of the party line in our country. Through sports and through our victories, our success in the Olympic Games, in hockey, or in other sporting disciplines, but especially in the Olympics and the World Championships, it was through our successes that we proved the superiority of the Soviet system.
For me, it became a war. And that's when I really started to bear down. Really. And I knew that I had to get myself together, get my act together, and we'd have to become a team. And how do you become a team in a 3 weeks, a month? It's almost virtually impossible. Those guys, the Russians, were together for 3 years practicing. We found out later. We didn't know this. Us guys were together for 2 weeks.
The Soviets started the second game by imposing a fast pace, knowing that they were physically stronger. The Canadians had made a few changes and began to adapt their game to that of their opponents.
We obviously had to check them a lot closer than we did. And their transition game was so fast. The forwards had to really help our defensemen out a lot more. We had to think defensive hockey a lot more than we ever had. Going into the first game, we didn't think any defense whatsoever. We were going to take it to them and let them make the adjustments. But obviously, we had to make some serious changes, and obviously we had to get more physical with them. But we really had to be careful with their transition game. Boy, they were gone like a shot. So as forwards, we had to be far more cognizant of what was going on in our end of the rink and watching our men.
For the Soviet at center ice, they're giving them a tough ride and finally knocked them down. And Starshikov.
On s'est aperçu qu'il faut la couvrir le milieu et les laisser aller à l'extérieur.
We realized we had to cover the center and force them out wide.
D'habitude, c'est qu'on est
On a nice
habitué à aller
rink,
devant les
you tend to head for goal,
Mais eux,
but they loved controlling the puck.
Ils circulaient beaucoup avec la
They
rondelle.
loved to move it about.
Alors, on s'est aperçu
So
que
we thought,
si on couvre
if we
la-
control the crease
que le devant des
in front of the goal,
alors,
they'd
ils
stake out
peuvent
wide and wouldn't
faire
pose a
ils
threat.
sont pas vraiment
The CSKA rink, home to one of the most prestigious clubs in Moscow. Several of the 1972 team players were from the CSKA, and the club is still one of the Russian First Division leaders. Viktor Kuzkin is a club veteran. Playing as an attacking defenseman, he headed the Soviet defense. He also had to adapt to the Canadian style of play.
Which Canadian player gave you the biggest problems? Why? Because first of all, he was very big, very good on his skates, and very fast. And when he entered the goal-scoring area, He was very difficult to counter. He was incredible whenever he got near the goal. When there was a face-off near our goal, Esposito was a big danger. He scored a lot of goals against us like that. That was our problem zone. He really was the most dangerous player throughout the series. We had very different systems of play. The Canadians were physical. They got the puck out of the wings and pressed into our zone. We, on the other hand, advanced mainly by passing. We didn't make long clearances across the ice. We moved the puck around with the objective of passing our way into their zone. And then, how can I say, there was another big difference. We respected the rules.
The 8 games were refereed according to international rules, which limit the extent of violent contact between players. The Canadians did as much specific training as they could, but old habits die hard.
Canadian hockey, American hockey is a very tough hockey, so you can hit guys. You know, we couldn't stand the spearing, this kind of stuff. Well, over there, they're a lot more subtle, a lot of spearing, and you know, you just don't spear somebody. But you know, they were sort of sneakier tactics, and they were getting away with them. Or we would hit a guy with what we would think would be a good check, and they would call it charging or boarding, and you'd say, what is this about? This is the way we played the game. But we were getting penalized because of the difference.
In hockey, in my era, and when we played, if somebody did something to you, you dropped your stick and your gloves and you punched them, and you had a fist fight. But you're on the ice, you're not going to get hurt. You don't get hurt in a fist fight. How you get hurt in hockey is when you hit with the stick. And that's what they were doing to us. They were spearing us behind the kneecaps. Behind my kneecaps were all black and blue. Nobody ever did this to me before. And I didn't know how to respond. And if you retaliated, you sat in the penalty box. And we couldn't deal with that. We had to get it in our mind that we had to take it to beat them. And we did. We took it. To this day, Boris Mikhailov, who is now, I think, the coach of the Russian national team, I don't even know, he speared me and I never got him back. He may be the only one that I never got back.
To Mikhailov, who lost it. Mikhailov gets it again, number 13.
I didn't like him. No, I didn't like him because I thought he was a very dirty player. Very dirty player.
By Kirkland, who moved in right underneath them. Frank Mahovlich lobbed it to Nikita. Nikita tried to go through, and they're hitting each other hard.
Boris
again.
Mikhailov. That's when he nailed me, speared me, and I got a penalty for retaliation. But I wanted him so bad. I just went. I wanted to fight him so. I never fought. I fought once a year because I had to. You know, you had to in the NHL, or else these guys would kill you. And I wasn't a fighter. Absolutely not. I liked to play the game. I wanted to score goals. But that guy, I owe you, Boris. To this day, I owe you.
The Canadian player, Bergman, was down.
Oh yeah? He wants to hit me? Well, I give him some back too. I have my principles as well. If someone hits me, I hit back. If we meet and he goes for me, then I'll have to respond.
The second game was nothing like the first. The Canadians had learned a lesson from their previous defeat.
By Esposito in the Canadian net.
I scored the first goal. Cashman made a tremendous play, and I scored. And then Peter Mahovlich probably scored the goal of the series. I was on the ice with him. We were killing a penalty. Guy Lapointe passed the puck over to the boards. And I flipped it off the boards, and it went past their defenseman who was pinching. Peter picked the puck up, came down, faked it on Guserev. Faked him out, went in, faked Tretiak, and put it in the net. And we were a man short. And very seldom you scored on the Soviets when they had a power play. And I'll never forget that. I jumped in this big stiff's arms.
Still wondering where the puck is. Peter Mahovlich.
It was one of the great goals I've ever seen in my life. at the most opportune time. And then Cornway scored a goal with his speed. Brad Park made a perfect pass. Isn't it wild? I can remember it as clear as day.
40 seconds left in the penalty. Up the center ice, Park over the right side. Cornway coming right in. He shoots. Score! Cornway!
I remember Cornway just zooming up that right wing. And Brad Park and he went around that defenseman and around Tretiak like he was standing still. And we beat him 4-1 that second game. We knew we could beat them, but it took every ounce of energy we had.
And of course, Jean Rattel.
The Soviet response was not long in coming. Still in Canada, the third and fourth games were a show of Russian supremacy. The Soviet style, a passing game, moving the puck around, upset the Canadians, who reverted to their old ways.
Stop. They're getting that passing play here. Jenkins drive. Scores! A long shot.
Two opposing concepts of ice hockey and of life, face to face on the ice.
Failed. Leanoff going in. Number 9 is knocked over by Goldsworthy. And he gives him the elbow
Their
again.
whole mentality was different than our mentality. They were communists, we were capitalists.
But did that mean something to you, this difference?
At the beginning, no, but by the end, you can bet your sweet bip it did. Absolutely.
Error. Here's a jamming session.
They made me do things that I didn't like myself. They all did. I did things in that series that I never did before and I never did after. I've never speared a guy like I did playing against these guys.
Soviet trying to get out, failed when Phil Esposito stopped his
Alexander
man.
Ragulin, big guy, number 5. He just passed away, by the way, just passed away. I see him coming. This guy's bigger than me. I see him coming, and I never did this as a player. I see him coming, I just got my stick and boom, right across here, and I cut him wide open. And the blood is, and he's looking at me, he's going, blah, 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 blah. I don't know what he said. And I went, Jesus, you got bad breath. God, you're terrible. I said it in different language, okay? And he just looked at me.
Now it looks like a bench penalty. Henderson was yelling at the referee.
Ragulin weighed around 105 kilos, 115 kilos with his equipment. He could have hit Esposito back. He would have deserved it, but Ragulin decided not to touch him. We had been given instructions. We weren't to retaliate against the Canadian assaults. It was better to answer through our play on the ice. And so, if a Canadian player was penalized and temporarily sent off, they had a player less. That was our answer, scoring goals.
With 49 remaining now in the second period with the...
At the end of the fourth game, the Canadians were totally overrun. They countered the Soviet skill with mounting aggression, committing foul upon foul. And for the first time, their fans who had been cheering them on a few days earlier were now booing them.
Front of the net there as with the score,
The first part of the series ended catastrophically for Canada, who won only one of their 4 home games.
There's a very disgusted
After the game in Vancouver, I was, picked as a star, went out there, and while he's asking me, there were 3 or 4 young guys, about 18 to 25, I'd say, up in the stands, and they were yelling obscenities at me. The commies are better, the communists are better, why don't you admit it? It's a better lifestyle, it's a better this, better. And I thought, wow, that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. And I went off.
For the people across Canada, we tried, we did our best, and for the people that boo us, geez, all of us guys are really disheartened, and we're disillusioned, and we're disappointed in some of the people. We cannot believe the bad press we've got, the booing we've gotten in our own buildings, and if the Russians boo their players, if the Russians boo their players like some of the Canadian fans, I'm not saying all of them, some of them booed us, then I'll come back and I'll apologize to each one of the Canadians, but I don't think they will. I'm really disappointed. I am completely disappointed. I cannot believe it. Some of our guys are really down in the dumps. We know we're trying, but hell, I mean, we're doing the best we can, and they got a good team, and let's face facts. But it doesn't mean that we're not giving it our 150%, because we certainly are.
We became a team right there. Right there. We all stuck together. We were together from that moment on. And the thought was, okay, let's get to Russia. We want to get there.
On September the 20th, 1972, the Canadian delegation arrived in Leonid Brezhnev's Moscow during one of the most oppressive periods in the country's history.
We arrive in Moscow, and I remember we were in two buses, and it was dingy and gray and miserable. We're looking, and we're like, and I remember Frank Mahovlich, he says, you know, he says, they must have weapons out in the country here. They got weapons. Maybe we should stay in tents outside of the city, because they were told us the rooms would be bugged, which they were, with microphones. And it was like, where are we going? And when we got to the hotel, I remember going up there and they give us a key that we weren't allowed to keep. They come and unlock the door and let you in. And then they'd lock the door. I said, but this is ridiculous. I remember walking in Red Square, and all these soldiers, I guess with the Kremlin, right? And they got the guns, and they're standing, and you couldn't cross a certain part of the street. We didn't know. I started to walk. The guy, "Niet, niet." I said, what, "Niet, niet"? I'm looking at him, "What, niet, niet"? He's got a gun, I got nothing. I said, "I want to go over there." "Niet, niet, niet." And the interpreter said, a guy named Gary Smith, he said, "Phil, don't get him riled. You can't go over there." I said, "This is unbelievable." I wasn't used to the lack of freedom. I wasn't used to that. Telling you the truth, I couldn't handle it.
The Canadians' comings and goings were observed, and the players were soon convinced that their phone was bugged.
And why would they have bugged the rooms? What would we have heard? These weren't politicians. This story's pretty ridiculous. I've heard Esposito and the others say they were sure they'd found a mic under the rug in their hotel room. So they started trying to take it off. And by unscrewing the thing, they unhooked the light fitting of the room below. You see how ridiculous it is. But for sure, in the USA and Canada, everyone was scared of the USSR. This was the first time their players had come over. They half expected to see bears in Red Square. They thought Moscow was like Siberia, perhaps that we were barbarians, and it was like being in another planet. Unfortunately, in North America, that was the image they gave of the USSR.
And I mean, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And I think that we...
But did you believe that? I mean, was that true, or was it just...
well, I think I think a lot of it was... I mean, it was psychological warfare, I think, to a certain degree. But after I look back, I think a lot of it was just incompetence in the socialism. Like the bus driver wouldn't show up. No big deal. You know, what, are you going to fire the guy? You know, like there was no accountability or anything like that, or trying to get on the ice, or the meals and those type of things. But then when they stole our beer, that was it. They stole our beer. It was definitely war at that point.
Les Russes, faut comprendre. S'ils ont une chance de vous déranger,
You have to understand the Russians.
de vous faire enlever la
If they get an
mentalité
opportunity
du
to
hockey
put you off your
pour
game,
penser à d'autres choses, pour être capable de
if
gagner,
it helps them to
ils vont
win,
faire. Il y avait
they're
beaucoup
going
de
to do it.
téléphones, des fois, qui sonnaient. Mais
There were
par
lots
contre,
of
le
phones
système
ringing
était
at certain
tellement
times.
mal en point,
But then the
ça faisait
system
des
was in such a
erreurs
mess,
que les
or maybe
gens
it was
faisaient,
down to
surtout à
human
4 heures
error.
du matin, des fois, le
Particularly at 4 a.m., the phone would sometimes ring.
Ça, c'est arrivé,
That happened quite
c'est
often.
arrivé, assez souvent.
Я не знаю, звонили им, не звонили.
I don't know if they
Я не
received these
думаю,
calls
что
or
это
not.
было. Не думаю. Не думаю.
But I don't think so.
Не знаю. Это что не
When you
знаю,
don't know, you can't say anything.
сказать не могу. Может, девушки ему звонили?
Maybe it was female admirers.
Может быть.
And then they brought us on, you know, they play these little mind games with you. They brought us in, they made us wait for, like, I think it was like 2.5, 3 hours. And just in a holding cell, nothing going on. And you look back on it, all those little frustrations. And so instead of really, those things I think really got us worked up in the sense that, how can you treat us this way? You know, and then it became more than, really more than hockey when we got over there.
At the peak of the War of Nerves, Game 5 was played in Moscow. The atmosphere was very different to that of the Canadian rinks. There were no foghorns or popcorn here. The 3,000 traveling Canadian fans made more noise than the 12,000 Soviets who remained calm and ordered. The opening ceremony was shown live on TV, according to military protocol. The authorities wanted an irreproachable display.
Again, as a traditional emblem of hospitality of the Soviet Union.
Well, what was I supposed to do? I mean, I was stuck. I fell on my ass. I mean, that's what happened. Fil Esposito. And I went, bam, right on my butt. And I looked up. As I'm getting up, I made perfect eye contact with Brezhnev. Perfect eye contact. You ever make eye contact with somebody from across the room? And I went like this. And the guy beside him started to laugh, and Brezhnev, with his eyebrows that stuck up to here, I'm sure if he combed them back, it would cover his forehead. He turned to the guy, and the guy goes, and I started laughing. I did. I started laughing. And you know what? It loosened the guys up. It loosened everybody up. The Canadian fans that were in there were laughing. Even the Russian fans started to laugh.
This time the Canadians had worked hard. Before Moscow, they'd been to Sweden to get used to both the European game and the rinks, which were bigger than the American ones.
Over on the left side, a shot, it's right and knocked that down.
L'adaptation de la patinoire.
It was hard to adapt to the rink, which was much bigger than in Canada.
What does that change?
Ça changeait les angles
The angles.
parce que quand on
When
est
you're on a small
dans une
rink,
petite patinoire,
you're more in
on est
front of
plus
goal
devant-
than
plus
in the
devant
corners.
le but que dans le coin. Mais quand on égrandit la patinoire,
But
et
if you
élargit
widen
la
the rink,
patinoire,
the angles are
alors
different.
là, les angles sont plus pareils. Et vous demandez
Ask any hockey
n'importe
player.
quel joueur de hockey, c'est comme au football.
In
mettons, on
football,
met
if you make the pitch smaller,
la surface
you have to
de
change
jeu
your whole
plus petite.
style of play.
Alors ça change le style de jeu, la manière de
Same
jouer.
in hockey.
Alors au hockey, c'est la même chose.
Они уже стали играть немножко по-другому.
Once in Moscow, the Canadians started to play differently. In Canada, they played as individuals. They had no passing game. They just charged our goal. They gradually stopped whacking the puck up the rink and chasing after it. They started passing and sliding it around the rink in the Soviet fashion, much more like us.
Броскового варианта.
To the strict society of Brezhnev's USSR, Esposito and his teammates brought a touch of fantasy. Their numerous TV appearances made them popular among the Soviets. Still today, Russians over the age of 40 fondly remember the time the long-haired Canadians visited with their anti-conformism.
Back then, it was like seeing men from another planet. We couldn't dream of going to Canada or France. So when the series came, it opened a door to a new world, as though Canadian hockey would teach us something about other countries.
другими странами, в частности, с канадским хоккеем и так далее. Потому что мы
Before
даже
that,
по телевизору
we hadn't even
видели
seen them on TV.
канадских хоккеистов
We
по-настоящему.
learned that players over there had much more
Люди там были
freedom.
гораздо более свободны, чем у нас, потому что у нас
Our
такая
teams were
жесткая
ruled with an
дисциплина
iron
была в команде
fist,
и так
and the
далее.
Canadians seemed to be having
Там
fun.
были, так сказать, достаточно люди, которые
Although our
с
players were
любовью
amateurs,
относились к хоккею.
hockey was like a
Для
job
наших,
to them.
хотя они считались любителями, но для них это была такая работа, причем очень
They
жесткая.
were under constant pressure from coaches and from the party.
Тренеров, там, партийного руководства и так далее.
Soviet protocol obliged a trip to the famous Bolshoi Ballet in Moscow, a first for Phil Esposito.
I didn't want to go to that, but it was something to do. Bouncing around on the stage with tight pants and all this other stuff. And the girls are so skinny and they didn't look very good. At least if I was going to watch it, I wanted to look at nice people. You know what I mean? And I remember sitting there in this thing, and I remember turning to my wife and I saying, I got to get out of here or I'm going to pass out. This is killing. And it was hot in there. It was cold outside, but it was warm, and we were dressed in hot clothes, you know what I mean? And I remember doing this. And I was gone. And I woke up, she'd give me one of these, and it was just about over. I went, oh, thank God.
It was war. It got carried away, like all of us got carried away. And you went out on the ice and there was just such animosity and there was a ferocity. It's just a game. And you tell yourself that, but in this sense, it was more than a game. It was our Canadian pride, our way of life and everything. And so the emotional, you get so caught up in it, it was incredible.
The seventh game in the series, and the two teams are neck and neck. Convinced that a fair goal had been disallowed, Canadian official Alan Eagleson stormed the referee's table. Soldiers had to break up the struggle and hold Eagleson back.
Team are all over there.
We all got over there, and we had sticks, and we were swinging the sticks at the soldiers with guns to get Eagleson. And they were so shocked that they let Eagleson go. They were swinging their sticks at the soldiers with guns. I mean, it was crazy. It was really a scene out of a movie.
The police were trying to throw Eagleson out, and that's when they
Eagleson croyait peut-être que
Maybe Henderson thought the goal had been disallowed, that it hadn't been awarded, because all hell broke loose.
Le désastre.
Before the eighth and final game, the Canadians and the Soviets are level at 3-3 with one game tied. The winner of this game will win the series. The second period starts badly for the Canadians, who concede two quick goals.
I became possessed. I did. And I'd be damned if I was going to let them win. They were going to use this politically without a doubt in my mind, because it was, look at this. Our team comes and plays the Soviet team. They are structured, they are communists, and they beat the so-called, professionals at their own game. Why? Because it's so structured. And because it is communism, it's better than capitalism. I believe that. I believe it to this day.
The Soviets get it again. Blinov over on the far wing.
It was all you can give. And I remember at the start of the third period, I said, guys, we can do this. Let's give it whatever we got, every ounce of energy we got, and focus. Let's do this. We can do this. This play, I remember in slow motion in my mind. It never happened to me before. It never happened to me since. I can remember Peter picking the puck up behind our net, steaming up the right side, and I cut across like this to the blue line, and then cut back towards this as Peter went straight up that right side. All this is in slow motion in my mind. And he went, all 6'5" of him, full blast. And that defenseman knew he was coming.
Coming down the right wing, keeps on going into the
And I skated and went to the hash marks. Peter knocked the guy off the puck, shot the puck out to me. It bounced off a stick. And the puck bounced, and I grabbed it like this, and I thumbed it down, and I shot, and as I shot it down, the puck bounced over my stick, and I missed it the first time. Tretiak went down, and then the second one, and I scored, because he was already down, and I put the puck in. And after that, it was back to fast motion.
right in front of the net. Esposito banked it.
7 minutes left to play. The Canadians still trail by 1 goal. They finally equalized through Ivan Konoya.
The Canadian team grabbing each other there as a...
Just at that moment, a cordon of soldiers form a ring around the rink. The Soviets try to end the game before time has officially run out. The atmosphere is electric, and Canada tries to restart the match.
Great controversy going down there on the bench.
It was 30, 40 seconds to go in the period. The final period said the Russians are declaring victory, because it would have been a tie, but they had scored a couple more goals and 1 more goal than us. They were going to declare victory. Not so fast, Kowalski. Not so fast.
The referee finally manages to restart the game. With 40 seconds to go, the teams are still tied 5-5. Paul Henderson attempts a final attack.
I saw Cornway headed at the far boards, and I yelled at him. And I'm a right-hand shot coming off the wrong wing. And so I was hoping he would throw it across, and I could just see myself just stepping into it, top corner. But when he threw it across, it was too far out in front of me, and I couldn't reach it. Well, the defenseman took a run at me, and he come out and actually put his stick on between my legs, uprooted me, and I was going so fast, I actually crashed into the boards.
I was on the ice for at least a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I was not coming off the ice until we scored. Henderson, I don't see him until he's behind the net and he gets tripped up and he falls down. Cornway shoots the puck from the right side. Tretiak, and the puck bounces right out towards the dot to the right of Tretiak, but I'm coming this way, okay? And I see it, but I went like this. In the meantime, they forgot about Henderson because they knocked him down. He got up, just skated in front. Tretiak, for some unexplained reason, kicked this rebound right out. And there's Paul.
Here's another shot, right in front of the score! Henderson has scored for Canada! Henderson, right
All hockey players agree that Henderson's goal was the goal of the century.
And you know, it was really funny. Cornway, I was in his arms. Thank goodness he's got a strong back, because I almost killed him. Both of us were yelling, "We did it, we did it." You know, we did it.
Of their power.
Je veux dire, Paul, on l'a fait, we did it, we did it. On a réussi, on a réussi.
Very slow start in Canada.
Henderson, when he scored that goal, it's as close as I've ever come to kissing another man.
8 seconds at center. A long shot by Gusev. Trying to slide it back to the goal. The game is over. And Canada have won the series. They defeated the Soviets 6-5.
Вы знаете, я бы не сказал, что вот мы проиграли.
I can't say that losing this series, because the score says we lost, right?
Из-за этого к нам отношение там стало хуже.
It didn't change our lives, or how other countries viewed us.
Что сыграли мы в целом хорошо сыграли.
People thought we'd played well.
В общем-то, никак отрицательно как-то.
So the fact that we lost didn't have any negative impact on any of the players, or the team in general.
Если бы канадцы проиграли, то, конечно, там реакция была бы.
If the Canadians had lost, the impact would have been much more negative for their national team.
Со стороны общественности. Им бы, наверное.
Their fans would never have forgiven them.
Болельщики точно не простили бы.
So maybe it was for the best that Canada won the series.
Может быть, даже, видите, может быть, и к лучшему, что так.
The 8 games that made up the wonderful 1972 World Series changed world hockey, taking it into the modern era. Today, hockey players move from one continent to the next, and most of yesteryear's heroes still pull on their skates from time to time. Some nights, you can see them on a Moscow rink going through the motions.
The series allowed the Canadians to learn from our way of playing, from our collective game, and it allowed us to learn a lot about their way of doing things. The way they fought for every puck, especially in the goal crease. That's one of their main qualities. It's innate. They're born with that. They're never affected by the score. Whatever the situation, even if they're trailing by 1, 2, 3 goals, they go for it until the last second. Both countries gained a lot from that series. It was truly a fantastic encounter.
Tonight, the USSR veterans face Spartak Moscow. They may have lost their speed, but certainly not their touch.